Padre Pio had grown familiar with the quiet whispers of the spiritual realm, the subtle shifts that signaled a soul was nearing its final breath. But on this particular day, the sensation struck him abruptly, like a sudden pull on his heart. He paused, lifting his gaze from prayer, knowing instantly that a soul somewhere in the world was crossing the threshold between life and eternity. It was then that the vision opened before him with startling clarity. He saw a woman lying alone in her dimly lit room. Her breathing was shallow, her strength nearly gone. Though her body was frail, it was her soul that drew Padre Pio's attention. It hovered in a state of profound tension, caught between two forces, one pulling toward light, the other toward darkness. This was not the peaceful passing of a saint. This was the final hour of a woman whose life had wandered far from faith, far from grace. All around her were echoes of her past, the choices she regretted, the hardness that had grown around her heart, the years spent resisting God's call. Yet despite the spiritual distance she had created over a lifetime, Padre Pio sensed something fragile within her, something not yet fully extinguished. As her final seconds approached, the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds thinned. Padre Pio saw her soul flicker with fear, confusion, and a longing she had never expressed aloud. It was the look of a person who suddenly realized how close eternity truly was. And in that moment, Padre Pio understood why the vision had been given to him. This woman as final breath would not be ordinary. It would be a moment of profound spiritual struggle, a soul hovering at the edge of eternal consequence, waiting for the last decisive choice she would ever make. As Padre Pio's vision deepened, he was shown the long, winding path of the woman's life, a life marked not by open rebellion against God, but by quiet, steady distance. She had not hated faith. She had simply drifted away from it, year after year, until the absence felt normal. Padre Pio saw her childhood, once filled with innocence and simple trust, slowly overshadowed by disappointments that hardened her heart. There were moments in her youth when she felt God calling her gently through a comforting word, a near accident avoided, a sudden feeling of peace, but she ignored each one, convincing herself they meant nothing. As adulthood arrived, she surrounded herself with noise and busyness, never allowing silence to remind her of the faith she had abandoned. She made choices that left wounds in her heart, wounds she never tended to. Pride kept her from admitting mistakes. Fear kept her from seeking forgiveness. Padre Pio saw seasons of bitterness carve deep lines into her spirit. Broken relationships, betrayals, and losses piled up until she believed God had turned his face from her. In truth, she was the one who had turned away, but despite her stubbornness, a quiet ache followed her, a longing for something she could never quite name. This longing, though buried under years of denial, remained like a tiny ember glowing in the darkness. And as she grew older, regrets began to surface, regrets she never confessed to anyone. Moments of compassion left undone. Apologies never spoken. Opportunities for kindness ignored. She carried all of these silently, believing it was too late to change. Padre Pio realized then that the woman's soul was not hardened beyond hope. It was simply lost, weary, and afraid. Her distance from God had been built over a lifetime, but the desire to return had never fully died. As Padre Pio continued to watch, the atmosphere around the dying woman shifted. Her breaths became faint whispers, each one more fragile than the last. Her eyes, once clouded with resignation, suddenly flickered with a strange awareness, as if something unseen was drawing her attention. In that final moment, when her body could no longer hold on to life, her soul began to awaken. Padre Pio saw her spirit tremble as the boundary between life and death opened before her. She could feel the weight of her past pressing heavily upon her, a lifetime of ignored grace, lost opportunities, and hardened choices. For the first time in years, her heart felt completely exposed, and with this exposure came fear. Not fear of death itself, but fear of what awaited beyond it. Then something remarkable happened. In her last conscious second, before her soul fully separated from her body, a memory pierced through the darkness, a small forgotten moment from childhood when she had prayed with pure innocence. That single memory stirred something deep within her, something she had buried beneath years of doubt. The tiny ember that had survived in her heart flickered to life. With the final strength she possessed, she formed a thought not spoken aloud, but cried from the depths of her soul. God, if you can hear me, have mercy on me. It was not eloquent, it was not rehearsed, it was not perfect. But it was sincere. Padre Pio saw heaven respond instantly. A radiant light descended, soft yet powerful, surrounding her soul like a gentle embrace. Darkness recoiled. Her plea spoken in the last breath of her earthly life had pierced eternity. In that single, honest cry for mercy, everything changed. The woman who had spent a lifetime distant from God finally reached for him, and God, in his infinite mercy, reached back. Padre Pio watched as the woman's soul was lifted from her body and drawn into a realm unlike anything the human mind could imagine, a place where divine justice and divine mercy met in perfect balance. The transition was not gentle at first. Her soul shuddered as her entire life unfolded before her in a panorama of truth. This was judgment not as humans imagine it, with harshness and condemnation, but as God sees it, total honesty, complete clarity. Every moment of her life was revealed with piercing accuracy. Padre Pio saw scenes of anger, selfishness, wounded pride, and years where she shut God out. The spiritual emptiness she had carried for so long now stood exposed. Nothing could be hidden in the light of eternity. The woman saw the consequences of her choices, not as accusations, but as reality. For a soul unprepared, the truth itself becomes painful. But then, something extraordinary happened. The instant her final plea for mercy echoed in the spiritual realm, the light around her changed. It grew warmer, softer, more welcoming. Heaven did not dismiss her sins. Each one was acknowledged, but her last-second cry had opened a door that would have otherwise remained closed. The sincerity of that final moment, that desperate turning toward God, carried weight in the eyes of divine mercy. Padre Pio saw angels approach her, not celebrating, but gently guiding her, shielding her from the darkness that once waited to claim her. Her soul was not ushered into glory immediately. Salvation did not erase the consequences of a lifetime lived without God, but she was saved from eternal separation, from despair, from the fate she had nearly chosen. Heaven's judgment revealed both truth and compassion. Her past was real, but so was her repentance. And in the balance between justice and mercy, her soul found hope at the very last breath. For generations, people believed that prices were like a compass, a clear, honest signal pointing toward supply and demand. If something became expensive, it meant it was scarce. If prices dropped, it meant abundance. But today, that compass is broken. We're living in an economy where prices are no longer messages, they're manipulations. Look around and you'll notice it everywhere. The price of food rises even when harvests are good. The cost of rent shoots up even when new buildings stand half empty. Gas prices swing wildly even when oil supply is stable. These aren't natural fluctuations. They're artificial waves created by corporations that know the public can't fight back, can't negotiate, and can't opt out. And the strangest part? Most people still blame the market. But there is no real market anymore, only engineered scarcity and controlled perception. Prices no longer respond to what's happening in the real world. Instead, they respond to what a handful of powerful institutions want the world to believe. This is how free markets die. Not with a loud crash, but with a quiet transformation when competition disappears, when transparency fades, and when consumers become data points instead of participants. Today's prices don't measure value. They measure power. They show us not what things are worth, but how much corporations think people are willing or forced to tolerate. In this new economic reality, understanding prices isn't about economics anymore. It's about understanding control.